Hello there, this will only be a short video and it's something a little bit different but will lead on to some videos I hope to do once spring and summer arrives and I get to travel around more. And that'll be about visiting Roman sites, other sites of archaeological, historical interest, maybe some museum collections as well, and talking a little bit about what's there, using some of the photographs I've got from other visits I've done in the past to put together a little bit about some significant places that people might be interested in and that maybe they'll have a chance to visit one day. And sometimes ones that are a little bit obscure, so might not be as well known as they deserve to be. But today I'm just going to give a little bit of an introduction to the exhibition that's currently running in the British Museum in London, and this is Legion: Life in the Roman Army. Now, I got to take a little look at this just a few days ago with a friend when I was visiting London, and I'm planning to go back next month and take a proper look and get some photographs and this sort of thing, and I'll probably do a longer video about it then because there's a lot in there. But really, I just wanted to say that if anybody has an interest at all in Roman history, but it's specifically the Roman army or the Roman military, and you get the chance to be in London until, I think it's there till the late June, about the 23rd, something like that, then I would advise you to go along and book. It's well worth doing. There's an awful lot of stuff in there that for me it was nice to see in the flesh, as it were, because I've seen so many pictures over the years, but this is the real thing. So things like the Dura Europus scutum, the rectangular shield found at Dura Europus out there in Syria, dates to the 3rd century AD, but it's the only rectangular scutum to survive anything like intact, and really to any great extent at all, from the Roman period. So that classic tile-shaped rectangular curved edge shield that we see so often in so many monuments. This one hasn't got squared off edges, but some of them do. This is it. This is all we've got as physical evidence for its size, its shape. It was slightly distorted because of the way it was stored in a tower, and we don't know whether this was one that had been in recent use or was something that was put away for a reason. Nevertheless, that's it. We have the Phaeum shield, a 1st century BC oval semi-cylindrical shield that was originally by the excavator categorized as Gallic or Celtic, but is almost certainly a Roman army shield, or by somebody who's copying how the Roman army does this. That's the only other complete legionary scutum. There are a couple of oval shields from Jura, and there are fragments of them from elsewhere, and we have rather more leather shield covers from other parts of the empire. There's one from Caerleon, not far from me. There's quite a few from Germany, from Holland, that sort of area, that give you the dimensions of a shield, though not necessarily the curve, not exactly, because remember, a cover obviously is loose and has to go over the top. But for something that is such a quintessential feature of a Roman soldier, we immediately recognize the scutum. You can see it in the picture there behind me, one of those Peter Connolly illustrations I have as posters in my office. You see those square shields, rectangular shields, and you know Roman legionaries straight away. So it's lovely to see the thing. It's lovely to see the detail painted on. It's a very hard thing to get to see. This is the first time in my life I've seen it. Also from Jura, you have the cataphract horse armor. Again, I've seen lots of photographs, I've read the reports, I've read the analysis, I've read Simon James' wonderful books on Dura Europus and its military equipment there, and more generally on the fort and the military community. But to see the thing, and it's displayed quite well on a sort of horse-shaped support to give you an idea, and it looks a lot sturdier. It really looks like it means business as protection when you see it in the flesh, which I know had always been there, but it hadn't struck me quite so much. You've got other older stuff that hasn't been seen, a lot of stuff from Newstead. There's one of the chamfer on the horse face coverings, this sort of thing. Lots of tombstones and monuments, again, many of them very old friends. You've got Centurion Caelius, the Primus Pilus, who fell in the Varan disaster I've talked about before. And I'm sure I have seen the original one of this, but I can't remember because there are several copies in various German museums that I'm never quite sure which one the original is from memory, but there it is. And with his two freedmen either side, you've got those marvellous ones with the standard bearers. You've got the horse archer from Mainz. That's one of the clearest examples of a Roman auxiliary cavalry horse archer, although the body is quite corroded, so you can't see the detail of his equipment and uniform as well as we'd like, but nevertheless it's marvellous. They've got papyri that, again, I have read lots of times, or because I'm not a papyrologist, I've lazily read the translations, but it's lovely to see them, and you actually see some of these letters home. So there's tremendous stuff there. There's lots of detail. There's the recently discovered and reconstructed Lorica segmentata from Karl Kriese, from what I think everybody pretty much now agrees is the site of, or at least part of the site of the Varan disaster in AD 9, where the 3 legions were destroyed, because probably, as it's described in Dio and elsewhere, this is a battle that occurs as a series of actions over several days. You've got some other bits and bobs from there and from elsewhere. But it's interesting seeing that, and the way it's reconstructed. It actually looks as if it's designed for a fairly big, thick-set person. One of the big things, when they reconstructed back in the late 60s, early 70s, the Corbridge Lorica segmentata, when they first worked out how this segmented banded armour actually worked, the reconstructions they made were very small, and reenactors complained that they were uncomfortable, they pinched and all this sort of thing. And you wonder, was the reason that this stuff was buried at Corbridge was actually because it was too small for just about anybody. It's something, there is an illusion where people go to museums and they see uniforms of the Napoleonic era, say, or the 18th century, and are often struck by how small the uniform jackets are, particularly of ordinary soldiers more than officers. Now, one of the reasons is that the jackets that survive were usually the ones that were not issued to any soldier because they were too small. After all, if you're a contractor supplying 1,000 jackets to a regiment in the British Army in Spain, then the more you can supply that is of the sort of extra small size rather than the medium, the large, and the extra large they might actually need, the more money you make on these bulk transactions. So it's sometimes an illusion. On the whole, yes, there were a lot of smaller people around. Diet has increased the size, both girth and height, of peoples, particularly in developed countries in the West, building on, size people were anyway, but a lot of it has to do with diet, which is an arguable thing in the ancient world. And then you come into all the question of just who is joining the army and how well does the army feed them once they get into the army. But that was interesting. That was quite striking. This really looked like it was worn by quite a big bloke. Now, that may be in partly the way the reconstruction worked, but it can't be entirely an illusion. So that's interesting. There are some good helmets, some good weapons, gladi. For the more macabre, there are a few skeletons like those ones from Canterbury that were discovered when I was a kid, of these 2 men with swords who seem to have been buried rather hastily and perhaps, murdered and disposed of. There are some nice inscriptions. There's really a lot that's there. So if you have an interest, as I say, and you can get there, I would heartily recommend it. I'm certainly going back. But also, if you've got kids with you, the horrible histories have come up with, there's a sort of child's trail around it with the, the talking rat they have in that show. I have a small child, that's why I'm familiar with horrible histories, because it wasn't around when I was a kid. That means there's some quite good fun bits for them to do as well, little puzzles and this sort of thing, and things to smell and things to scratch and all this sort of stuff. So I think there's quite a lot there that's rather nice. So you can manage as a family thing. There's enough that's just interesting, spectacular, curious enough. They have the Sulpicia Lepidina birthday invitation from Claudia Severa there, with again that emphasis that probably that last line in the main text was written by Claudia Severa herself, and therefore is the first handwriting by a woman in Europe. That's still quite something. Yes, it's always on display in the BM, but it's nice as part of the collection. They've got a few bits and bobs from Vindolanda as well. They've got the Regina tombstone from South Shields, or again, this might be a copy, I'm not quite sure, but nevertheless, it's a very good copy. So there's a lot to see. It's very well laid out. It seemed that there was enough space. Sometimes exhibitions can be so crowded together because they're packing in lots of small things. This has got quite a lot of big stuff. And that's quite nice because there's usually enough room to see it properly. So anyway, I'm going back in March sometime. I plan to take a camera, and if they'll let me take some photographs, and I'll maybe do a longer talk about it then. But this is just to say, if you get a chance, it's interesting. I haven't yet bought the catalogue, though I will next time, because again, I suspect, if only for the illustrations, that'll be good. But usually the BM produce some very nice volumes to accompany these big exhibitions. So I've got ones from the mummy portraits they did years ago, and the Cleopatra ones, and all this sort of thing that are nice things to have on the shelf. And particularly again when you want an illustration, it's often there. You think, oh yeah, that's a good clear image. So well worth doing. It's well worth taking an interest if you can't get there in person. I'll do a bit more on this sometime in the future. And as I say, this is meant to be the first of videos to come, but probably not for a couple of months because the weather's still not great here, of looking at some particular sites. And I may well start, because I'm South Wales based, with Caerleon, Caerwent, places like that, because they're not as well known as they ought to be. And for those who can reach them if they live in Britain, but also for those who are coming over to Britain at any time as a visit, if you can have the opportunity to get down there, if you can spare the time and you have an interest, they're well worth it. So this will be something to come in the future, but don't hold your breath for the next one because that'll probably be a while. But because this is fresh, because the exhibition's only opened in the last few weeks, just wanted to add my voice to. I think it's generally got good reviews, but this is coming as a confirmed Roman army geek that, for me, there was some great stuff to see there. I really enjoyed it.